You know, I had mixed feelings on the GH7. I can't wait for this to come to a flagship full-frame camera. If you're shooting log, there's always going to be limitations. This is probably the future. DPs go, okay, for my mirrorless system, I'm going to go with Lumix, or I'm going to go with Nikon over Sony or over Canon.
ARRI Log C3 was just officially announced on the S1 II, the S1R Mark II, and the S1 IIe. Well, in this video, I'm going to be deep diving into the benefits of how ARRI color science being in Lumix cameras, how this positions Lumix cameras in the future and just in general as a whole, and if this is really a game changer or more of a cool party trick. And joining me today in this conversation is a good friend of mine and a third-time returning guest, Anson & Co., who is a talented creator, filmmaker, and photographer, and who I know for the longest time has been trying to get the best color and image out of all of his videos, shooting in cine-like DNG, which is crazy. But without further ado, Anson!
Do you mean...
What's up, brother?
Do you mean cinema DNG?
Did I say cine DNG?
You said cine-like... It was like some weird...
Listen, cine-like DNG.
Mixture of Lumix and Sigma there, so...
As I'm just trying to figure out all the different color profiles and dual ISOs on all three of these cameras with Vlog and then with ARRI Log C3, I don't got time for your whatever.
It's 500 and
okay,
4,000.
yeah.
I've already got it.
Oh, yeah? And what's it on the S1R Mark II?
160 and something else.
So, as I mentioned in this conversation, Lumix just announced, we've obviously known for a while now, but finally it's officially announced, and you're able to get this paid upgrade for $200 on any of the S1 models. Now, I do kind of want to take a couple back steps here before diving in and talking about the new flagship and ARRI Log C3 being in full frame cameras. This was originally announced in the GH7 back in 2024. So I'd love to hear kind of your first impressions of ARRI Log C3 coming to Lumix on the GH7 before we move into talking about it being in full frame.
You know, I had mixed feelings on the GH7. The GH7 is having ARRI Log C3 on the GH7 was awesome, but it came with the fact that it was still a micro four thirds sensor. You didn't have dual native ISO, like all these different caveats that like I think in my GH7 video, I even said like, I can't wait for this to come to a flagship full frame camera. And now we have it. And so like, I'm really happy with what they did with the GH7. It actually makes the GH7 kind of compelling if, you know, if you're like me and maybe budget's tight, you can't afford two S1 Mark IIs. You can potentially do like S1 Mark II and a GH7 as a B cam. And so I do like that aspect of it, but I think it was definitely a play by Lumix to include ARRI Log C3. And I'm sure we'll probably get into why here in a little bit, why it's probably a play, and a big one.
And I think it was interesting because I think, is it ARRI or ARRI? I think we also need to get that out of the way because I keep hearing it both ways and I don't want to be the fool saying the wrong thing.
I feel like I saw somebody from ARRI say that it was, somebody from ARRI said it could be either way. We'll go with ARRI. We'll go with ARRI. Okay,
cool. I was going to totally be going with ARRI this entire time. That's great. Anyways, so ARRI, or ARRI, whatever. I thought when it came to the GH7, when that camera got announced,
wait. Comment below if it's ARRI or ARRI and we're completely botching this. Leave us a comment just to, I'm sure you will involuntarily, but just in case.
Just in case. How are you pronouncing it?
Yeah.
Number 1, ARRI, or number 2, ARRI.
There you go. One or two.
People are going to be like, I pronounce it like this, and they just type it out.
It's the bokeh versus bokeh discussion.
Anyways,
I digress.
We digress. So I thought the GH7 was like one of those like, wow, this is really cool. It definitely made the GH7 like, this could be a great crash camera where you have high-end productions buying bulk of these cameras Granted, I wonder if there's a bigger agreement on the backside of Lumix for production houses offering, hey, we're willing to buy like 20 of these cameras. Can you just install, ARRI Log C3 in all of these cameras for us? Because that would be kind of a hassle, I would imagine. But then again, I guess they could just hire some PA at that point to be like, install all of this for us. But I think it was kind of like, oh, that's kind of cool. It's in Micro Four Thirds. But I think everyone, when the GH7 announced and heard that ARRI Log C3 was coming to it, everyone was like, okay, that's cool. But is this coming to the S5 IIX? Is this coming to full frame? And of course, they didn't announce it during the S1R Mark II announcements. But on the S1 II in Texas, at least, they announced it. And I feel like I remember the entire room being like, oh, this is legit. ARRI cameras, ARRI and LUMIX are not partnering up. They're licensing from ARRI to get their color science in their cameras. And I felt like it was a lot more serious when it was coming to the full frame. So I'm curious to hear kind of your first impressions and thoughts when you heard that ARRI Log C3 is coming to the full frame S line of cameras.
I mean, kind of a little bit of that previous answer of like, or what you said is I feel like it kind of no, I do. I think hearing ARRI Log C3 coming to the full frame cameras kind of matured the color science, simply because, it's now in your flagship of flagship cameras. And it's not, again, I think the GH7 is a flagship camera, but, people are always going to look at it and say, well, that's Micro Four Thirds and so on and so forth. And so to have it in your, full frame camera, because that opens up the discussion of, things like, okay, well, can I potentially, shoot a S1 Mark II in ARRI Log C3 with an Alexa LF or a LF Mini. And that becomes a big deal for productions that maybe need, again, maybe a crash cam or even somebody that like, maybe wants to get into an ARRI system, but maybe it's not that time in their career. They want to get used to the ARRI workflow, especially if they're renting ARRI cameras. This gives them the ability to do that for a fraction, like less than a fraction of the cost of an ARRI camera.
And I feel like whenever Lumix comes out with some type of more proper cinema camera, if they ever do, I feel like what specifically that they're positioning themselves as is like ARRI cameras are never going to be coming down and making, $5,000, $3,000 cameras. Meanwhile, Lumix, I feel like is never going to be like, hey, we're going to make $25,000 cameras unless some type of drastic shift in the camera market share. So I think it's this partnership licensing agreement that just seems like it's a great way to like, okay, it seems like the entire Lumix ecosystem is starting to finally fully flesh out. And now you're able to, have a proper upgrade path from, the S9, the S5 II, now you have the S1 IIe, and then there's the flagship S1 models that have various different routes. And then, being part of the L-Mount Alliance, there's a whole different realm of like cameras you can shoot in now in this mount system. But I'm curious to hear from yourself, why do you think ARRI Log C3 coming to full frame is a bigger deal than it's coming to Micro Four Thirds?
The easy answer for that would be that I don't think ARRI has a Micro Four Thirds camera. So like, if you're just talking about like sensor format or like the sensor size or depth of field or the things you get within that specific format of filming, ARRI does have full frame cameras. I mean, the Alexa LF, the LF Mini, I think that's Alexa 65, that may be Super 35, I can't remember. But it is more, I wouldn't say it's not apples to apples. It's not apples to apples, but it's closer to, in my opinion, than when it was on the Micro Four Thirds system. So I think that makes waves because of how many people, plus the amount of people that are filming in large format whether full frame, VistaVision, medium format. It's just, I think it's almost more niche now that people are shooting on Micro Four Thirds or Super 16 cameras. It's almost like you are going for a specific look when you shoot that sensor size now. And so, with everybody, it's kind of a little bit more of the popular format is full frame, medium format. And then that also correlates to, there's a little bit more of an apples to apples with the LF and LF Mini.
Now, I think before we get into context of who we personally think that the ARRI color science, because it's a paid upgrade at the end of the day, it's $200. So it's like questioning if you own a LUMIX S1 S12E, or even the S1R Mark II, is it worth that $200 paid upgrade? I guess let's put it in this context before we put it into like three focus groups who I think, and maybe you think, that ARRI color science is worth a paid upgrade, which we kind of already touched point on. Who probably doesn't need to get this paid upgrade?
Honestly, I think photographers don't necessarily need to. If you have an S1R Mark II, there's no point, really, not many points to do that. If you never are looking at getting into an ARRI workflow, I think that is a first and foremost. I think, people that just aren't shooting with an Alexa system, or don't have aspirations to shoot with an Alexa system or an ARRI system. I think if that's you, and that, like, you just like Vlog, for all intents and purposes, Vlog is a very good color science. I get people complimenting Vlog all the time. And it's a very good log profile. But I'd say those are the people that I would, that maybe two groups that I would say is not fit for. But that is, that's who I would say I don't think that would make sense for them.
Right. And I feel like, for most likely speaking, even if you do own a video production company and, you're shooting on the S1 II as an A camera, and then your B camera is the S5 IIX, you might be like, let me get the ARRI color science so I can tell my clients that these cameras can shoot ARRI Log C3. When you're really like, it's like one step forward, then like two steps back in a sense. Like, oh, you're shooting in like a industry standard color profile. You can get super rich colors out of it. Granted, you can still get amazing colors out of Vlog as well. Mm-hmm. But where you're kind of like shooting yourself in the foot there is if you have two different cameras from Lumix, and one is shooting in Vlog and then the other one is shooting in ARRI Log C3, now you're working with two different color profiles, and then it's just going to make matching the color profiles harder in the post workflow versus just both shooting on Vlog.
I was going to say that group makes sense too. Yeah, if you have other Vlog cameras, it may not make sense, especially if you do multicam.
Yeah. Right. Any multicam work, it makes it. And not even in multicam work as well. It's like, if you have, the desire to shoot a bunch of things, like, or if you're already working on a documentary and everything's been in Vlog, and then you just switch over to ARRI Log just because you can. Yeah, it's just going to make it more of a harder workflow in post workflow. So I guess for the people who we think it is worth it, who do you think is worth that they should probably get this paid upgrade? Which, again, $200, it's not nothing. You could get a lens with that, you can get a light with that. You can spend that money elsewhere, or you could put that money towards an XLR2. But who do you think should potentially consider, getting the ARRI Log C3 color profile?
Definitely people that are looking at ARRI cameras as an aspiration, 100%. Those are people that I think this makes sense for, because Lumix becomes that mirrorless system, that sub $4,000 solution. And even for that matter, like if we're talking about the GH7, because that's also a paid upgrade, sub $2,000 solution for ARRI Log C3. I think that is, if ARRI is your aspiration, but you're kind of like just kind of getting started, but you want to get into the ARRI workflow because of various reasons, then that is a group I would say, along those lines, people that are getting hired to be, working with ARRI cameras or getting potentially hired to be on set with ARRI cameras, this may be a good camera to own. Like, you know, that way you are just in the trenches with an ARRI workflow. You know, I often hear like DPs will have, you know, they'll have sets of lenses or cameras that is their, you know, obviously, you know, what they shoot with on set, but then they have their personal. And I think this would make sense for somebody that wants to kind of stay in that ARRI workflow for their personal camera. And so, and for that matter too, like maybe you do own an ARRI Alexa, LF or LF Mini or 65, and you want a crash cam, you want a, you know, a nice gorilla style camera. That's the other group. You know, if you want that, like maybe you're shooting a doc on an ARRI Alexa, maybe your talking heads are on an ARRI Alexa, and you've been, you know, shooting a doc. This may be a easier on your body solution than carrying around an Alexa camera, and it has IBIS and all of those things. And so this may be a more manageable solution for those times where you need to go off sticks or, you know, be a one-man band for those scenarios.
And I think you actually mentioned like a decent amount of people that I wrote down as well of like who I think this camera or why you should be getting this type of camera. But as you were talking, I've also thought of like a couple other reasons. If you're renting an ARRI Alexa and you need, like, those rentals can go up to anywhere from like, you know, $2,000 to $4,000 a day for just renting those type of cameras out. And it's like, hey, we can either get a second camera or we can just get this camera instead. And then all of our shoots going forward can be shooting in that ARRI Log C3 color profile.
Or even like for that matter, if you need to do pickup shots, like,
yeah.
You know, I don't know. Again, it's not, I don't think it's going to be, you know, I think we saw this with the GH7, how it's not like apples to apples. Like people were shooting the ARRI camera next to the GH7 and it wasn't perfectly the same, but it gets you a hell of a lot closer than if you were shooting with anything else. And so again, if this is A, your personal camera, or B, you just want to rent something and not break the budget, you can potentially rent an S1 Mark II or S1R Mark II and do your pickup shots, get that ARRI color profile without having to rent an ARRI Alexa again.
Or this could always be, you know, that B camera or C camera or a gimbal camera, crash camera, like you mentioned before. I think it's also interesting, like specifically how you mentioned, you know, if someone's already used to that like ARRI color workflow, or if someone's wanting to get into it, it's completely different than any log workflow. Like it's not simply like a conversion LUT and then you work with it the proper way. And I know Dustin Armstrong, our good friend, has an entire video deep diving explain this, how you convert your timeline color space into ARRI Log C3, and then you're outputting a Rec 709 Gamma 2.4, and then you export that like color space and output source. So you're just color grading log footage. It's not actually having the conversion being baked into the clip itself, which is a whole different workflow.
I need to go watch that video. I don't think I ever watched that video.
Yeah, it's really, and then he actually got that certified by ARRI.
Yeah,
too.
I remember them saying that the ARRI engineers said that was the correct way of doing it. So
yeah, so it's a completely different workflow than what everyone just assumes. Like you can just do a color space transform in DaVinci, take your vlog footage, convert it into ARRI footage, and then you're getting the same results. Which it's not technically. Yes, you can get close, but it's not technically the same. And then also, if you're telling someone who's already working with an ARRI camera, like, or you have that aspirations to do that, having to do that type of workflow on every single clip, and then that's not even the proper workflow of actually working with ARRI, because technically I think you would have to be converting all your footage, and then you would have to be changing your color space transform on your timeline. So that's a whole nother thing. But as you were speaking, I do think this actually introduces a new potential job for major, huge productions that no other camera can potentially offer. I don't know if it's a valuable workflow. So the people in the comments below, you can let us know that my idea that literally just came about. BTS shooters who can match the footage of what, or match like the color science footage of what, like, you know, the of the film. So like if they want to have BTS footage that's going to be in ARRI Log C3 color space, they have that as a potential. I am curious to hear your take on this before we get into the last question. What is your personal stance on just converting footage to different log profiles?
So this is a question because this is not an in-camera LUT conversion. This is for all intents and purposes ARRI color science.
Yes,
ARRI
worked with LUMIX.
Yeah,
ARRI worked with LUMIX to develop this Log C3. This isn't like DaVinci converting it.
Right.
Like this is actual ARRI Log C3 in a LUMIX camera with their curves and all that. I'm not a color science expert, but I'm curious to hear your hot takes on.
So this. Hot takes. It depends on how you shoot, if I'm honest. Because if you shoot ProRes RAW and if you're a DaVinci Resolve user and you go to Cinema DNG, it technically doesn't matter. Because log, if you're used to a RAW workflow, is a downstream action, or I think that's, I don't know what the exact term for it is, but converting it into a log footage from something like a true RAW is something that, like, if you get that footage pre-log conversion in a RAW format, you can make it pretty much any look that you want, because as long as it's capturing a good amount of colors. That's why a lot of people loved the Sigma FP, because it had Cinema DNG, or it has Cinema DNG, and they would convert it into a log ARRI. They would convert it to ARRI Log C3, and it was like having a little ARRI camera in your pocket. And so if you're shooting RAW, it doesn't matter, I don't think. If you're shooting log, there's always going to be limitations. I don't think if you converted ARRI Log C3 from S-Log, it's going to do the same thing as if you were to convert ARRI Log C3 from V-Log, or from F-Log for Fuji, or L-Log from Leica. Like, there's still some sort of color management happening right when that camera captures. And so, and again, unless you're working with raw footage, it's going to, the limitation's always going to be the sensor and the color information that's capturing. And so I think in some ways it doesn't matter if you're shooting RAW. I think at the end of the day, like, if the camera is capturing the colors and it's been calibrated to capture the colors how ARRI intended to capture the colors, that's going to be way different than if somebody takes S-Log and converts it to ARRI Log C3. It's just not going to be the same. So for that matter, I think again, unless you're shooting RAW, I think that makes a huge difference. Having it actually be the color science that is utilized in an ARRI Log C3 workflow. I'm
going to be doing in my video, so I guess a little context for this episode. We literally have like downloaded this, just recently, but like neither
literally
of us
like
actually,
an hour ago.
Yeah, well, yeah, mine was like early today, and I was like, let's do this, mostly because I have my 5-year anniversary later this month, so I'm trying to batch content out.
Congratulations.
Thanks, man. I'm just got back from Cabo, so next time they see me after this video, hopefully I'll be tan. We'll see. Besides the point, where is I going with this? Oh, no. Shoot, my brain is defaulting. I am going to be trying in my video something that maybe you'd be curious on you trying as well, is I am curious to see what it would look like if you took a LUT from DaVinci Resolve, from Vlog, convert it into ARRI Log C3 or even C4. Would be interesting to test. Put that into your camera as a real-time LUT, so your Vlog is being converted to an ARRI Log. Obviously, the big downside I'm already thinking about right now is you're going to be having to view log footage as you're filming, and you won't be, unless you have an external monitor and then your monitor has a baked-in LUT into it, and that's a potential workflow. But I'd be curious, and obviously I don't think either of us have the answers on what those results produce, if it's similar, close enough, or if it's completely different, which I'll be curious.
I'd be interested in those results. I'm going to let you do that, though.
Okay,
You're
thanks.
young.
I know.
You're young.
I'm just gonna stress myself out these 2 weeks before I leave to my my anniversary trip. Anson, I said one more question, but I lied. I have 2 more questions
Okay.
that kind of connect with each other. But before that, where can people check you out?
Anson and Co. on Instagram and YouTube. And if you are, for whatever reason, a brand watching this video, go to my website, ansonandco.com. There's a contact form there if you want to try to work with me.
There you go.
I've gotten this so like succinct. Third time's a charm,
Hey, come on. We're figuring things out on here on LUMIX ARRI's podcast. Anyways, while ARRI Log and LUMIX, this is technically not a partnership. This is a licensing agreement. I do think it's interesting that LUMIX has been partnering up with other brands with like the LMount Alliance. You have Blackmagic with raw output, you have Atmos monitors. Now they even have the proxy and frame.io integrations in their camera. I think it's interesting. I didn't even mention ProRes raw internal. It's interesting to see LUMIX kind of being on the forefront of partnering and working with brands. What are your thoughts in general with LUMIX doing this?
I think LUMIX knows that this is probably the future. I think if more brands that adapt to working together and understanding that is going to be the best thing for everyone. I think the thing you have to understand is the camera industry as a whole is, I actually heard a stat the other day that it's actually back on the rise again, but compared to like 10, 15 years ago, is suffering because of mobile phones and things like that. And so I think these brands are seeing this opportunity to save the industry as a whole and be competitive. And, the whole point of the LMount Alliance is kind of the bigger conglomerate of the, 5 different brands or however many brands on the LMount Alliance now. They're going to give the big 3 or big 2 a run for their money as a joint effort rather than just solo, because we may not all have the resources.
Right.
Panasonic is a giant company, but LUMIX is a very small company within that company. And so we may not have the resources of a Sony, of a Canon. And so being able to partner with other people is definitely the key to success, I think, for these camera companies.
Yeah, it's interesting that you mentioned the big 2 or big 3, because my last and final question actually does lead into this is, how can LUMIX partnering up with other companies or getting licensing agreements, how can this change the tides in the future of the big 3 or just, the camera market share as a whole? Because LUMIX isn't obviously the only company doing it as well. But they're probably, I would say LUMIX is the company on the forefront of partnering up with the most brands. With that said,
I think Nikon's up there, right?
Nikon bought straight up bought.
I mean, that's a next level.
Hence,
partnering.
they're in the big 3.
I don't know. I mean, how long did we say that Nikons are potatoes? I do think that it shakes up the
until
big
they bought
3.
Red.
Yeah, I think it does shake up the top contenders. I don't know how you can look at the specs of the S1 II and the fact that there is ARRI Log C3 and as a working DP not say, oh, I have to look at this camera. This is impressive. The same way that people are looking at Nikon cameras because maybe they're in a Red ecosystem and now Red color science is going to be, if not already is, I don't ever know, but is going to be in Nikon cameras. It's the same conversation. And it's making waves and it's making DPs go, okay, for my mirrorless system, I'm going to go with LUMIX or I'm going to go with Nikon over Sony or over Canon. I think Sony is probably going to be okay. I think, honestly, I think slowly Canon's going to lose the foothold, if I'm honest. Because you just don't, and maybe it's because we're in our ecosystem of camera influencers or camera YouTube, but you don't see as much crossover between the mirrorless and cinema. And I think even compared to a few years ago, I think you're seeing less and less Canon cinema cameras being used on, you know, bigger documentaries or things like that. I think Sony's going to be fine. I think Sony's big enough to handle whatever will happen in this whole shakeup.
Plus, they're like selling the sensors too at that point.
Yeah. But I do think that it could give Canon a run for its money. I think Fuji needs to deliver with their cinema camera. I think, Nikon needs to mature their relationship between Red and what that looks like. And honestly, I think as a whole, that just means we all win, right?
Yeah.
It's
interesting to see Sony. Like, I know Armando just did his interview, which at the time of recording just came out literally, I think, today.
Yeah.
Which was interesting because it was kind of Sony putting up being like, yeah, we ain't giving you guys Micro Four Third cameras and we don't need to make our prices cheap. And it was kind of like, I think that's like from a consumer perspective. Obviously, I'm very biased. I would probably say you're very biased towards Lumix as well. Of course, I have literally LUMIX ARRI's podcast. Regardless of that, I do think from a trying to be an unbiased standpoint of like as a consumer being like, okay, do I want more features? Do I potentially want to shoot 32-bit flow audio? Do I want more things that's going to bring more value for my money? Then you could go with Lumix. Or do you want to like go into the Sony ecosystem, which is a good ecosystem as a whole, but you will be missing out on features because it sounds like they will never be pinned open gate, and except for their higher end cinema cameras. So it's like it's gatekeeping features, which is what Canon did and does for a lot of their features. Like you only get certain log profiles in the cinema cameras. Meanwhile, on the lower end cameras, you're not getting that same log profile. There's so many times I'm doing color grade workflow and it's like, oh, I shot this on blank camera. And I'm like, cool, what log profile did you use? Because this camera industry has like 3 different ones. And in that, different cameras shoot different log profiles. Versus Lumix has always been Vlog, and that's it. And it's been really nice. And there was Vlog over time.
There was Vlog L.
For sure. I guess, yeah, that's fair. There was Vlog L, but that was, I think, like on Micro Four Third cameras only. And it was just the light version. So it wasn't like a fully log profile. You could still use a log conversion LUT and then just dial down that percentage. So I think it's interesting as a whole to see like, Nikon's coming out, like potentially Nikon's coming out with some Nikon cinema camera. Lumix maybe will hopefully one day.
We can all hope.
We can all hope. I will say the S1 II is kind of like, you put that on like a Cineback or a Rigid Pro, and that thing's pretty lit. I'm gonna say that. That camera.
I'm looking into buying my own personal copy. Like I'm on the one I have on loan from Lumix. This will be my A cam for the foreseeable future for sure.
Right. So I think there's a lot definitely to say with how the market can change in the future, and I think you do say. I think that's a valuable point. I think the one contender that is definitely probably. This is a hot take for sure, that Canon is probably the one that would be leaving the big 3. But I also see that the entire market share, instead of being the big 3, is going to be turning into like the common 5 or something like that, where it's going to be, instead of like giant percentages of these most camera industries, all going to turn into more even percentages, maybe with like Sony still being on top, of course. But yeah, well, thanks for joining me on this episode though, Anson.
Absolutely. Well, it's always
lots of hot takes. It's a lot of hot takes. But
I feel like I've calmed down. I feel like as I'm getting older, I've calmed down. You're supposed to get more crotchety as you get older.
Yes. Hey, hopefully there's a vlog out with us, and there's some funny takes in the vlog with you.
Dude, I need this to happen.
Haven't touched that thing. I keep saying I'm going to edit it, and it just hasn't happened. Anyways, Anson, thanks for joining me on this episode.
Yeah, absolutely. Peace.
And if you guys are interested in seeing another conversation that I had with Anson talking about the future of Lumix, check out that video right there. YouTube recommends more like this video right here. Until next one, guys. Peace.